Adam Conover on Joe Rogan. The debate that still to this day lives in infamy.
You're seeing folks transition much earlier age, you know?
This point is what I think gets under Joe's skin.
And so if someone is transitioning from the age of 7 years old, right?
Mm-hmm. You're talking about introducing hormones into children.
Working with those hormones, from that age, right?
Adam is openly acknowledging here just how impactful these hormones are.
The effects that the hormones have on your body are really profound, really profound. We're not to a surprising degree, right?
Joe's not going to let this go. This is what bothers him. He just casually threw in there transitioning children as though this is something that's just accepted now.
We just scratched upon the idea of kids transitioning at a very early age. I mean, there's been more scientific evidence that points that if kids don't do that, then when they wanted to be trans at an early age, they just become gay men, and that there's nothing wrong with that either. There's no reason to give kids hormones, and there's no reason to decide before a person's frontal lobe is completely fully developed, which doesn't even take place till 25. People don't know who they are. A 7-year-old, you won't even. People don't even give their 7-year-old phones. You don't let them vote. You're going to let them decide what sex they're going to be for the rest of their life.
The research that I've seen, and again, I'm not an expert on this.
He'll say something and then acknowledge that he's not an expert, so therefore he can't be held accountable.
This is the kind of topic where I really want to make sure that I know the research and that I'm, also speaking to trans folks, in this conversation.
Accuracy to what is true, sensitivity to a perceived and oppressed class. You can see the two things battling in his mind.
The research I've seen is that trans kids from a young age, they are incredibly consistent in when they're expressing their gender identity.
Really? Everything that I've seen from the evidence of my own eyes is absolutely opposite of that. I have seen a number of students transition as a group, almost as though it was a social thing. I've had students transition back and forth.
Okay, but that's a big generalization. You're talking about a lot of human beings.
Yeah, but
that fits this narrative by saying they're incredibly consistent. But if you polled these people, what are you talking about?
How do you know that?
I mean, that's I don't have the research in front of me that I saw, so I can't go into the details on it. But it was research that was surveying and tracking trans kids who declared their identity from a young age. Did it change? The answer was generally no, it really didn't.
Nothing I've seen would justify what he's saying.
I have a friend who has a trans kid. Don't know the kid's exact age, but we're in the age range that we're talking about. And he's explained that my child from a very young age consistently said, I am a girl. And has never contradicted themselves, never changed their mind. And so the humane thing and the thing that he felt was good to do as a parent was to embrace that choice on his child's part, right?
Why does that require medical intervention in the form of hormones?
Embrace that choice, meaning hormonally.
I shouldn't even phrase it as a choice, embrace that identity.
And he makes a mistake here claiming there's not even a choice being made.
But it is a choice, right? I mean, if you're choosing to add hormones to a child's body, that's a choice.
And this is where it goes downhill because this is what bothers Joe, as it should.
It's a choice blockers. It's a choice on the part of the parent. It's not a choice on the part of the child to in the same way that being gay isn't a choice. Yeah.
Okay, but if that's who they are, if they think that they're a girl, why do you have to give them hormones to make them more of a girl?
Because I'm sorry, can you expand on the question?
This is a classic stall out. He has no response to this, so he asks for a repetition to buy time to think about it. And Joe points that out. He's like, because I think this is starting to really get under Joe's skin. And he's like, that's a simple question. Why are you playing a game right now?
It's a simple question. If you say that the child thinks it's a girl, so you're going to give the child hormones.
Mm-hmm.
If the child thinks it's a girl, let it be a girl. You don't have. Why are you adding hormones? If you're shooting hormones into a child and you're affecting the child's development, you're saying that's not a choice. That's nonsense. Of course it's a choice. You're choosing to chemically change this child's body. You're choosing to inject things into this child's body on a regular basis that are going to radically affect the physical development of their body.
Yeah.
And you're saying that this isn't a choice. Well, it's definitely a choice to do that.
So, look, all I can do is defer to the experts that I know about this, right?
But you're very selective in which experts you choose.
So, for instance, there's an author named Bryn Tannehill, who's a former military helicopter pilot. I just interviewed her for my new podcast.
My entire concern is with children. My concern is not with young adults deciding to take steps to confirm their gender identity, who they feel they really are. I'm all for you doing whatever you want to do when you're an adult, when your mind is formed. But people change their mind. They change their opinion. They change their thoughts. There's nothing wrong with just deciding to be a gay man. There's nothing wrong with your body, as you grow and mature and develop, you growing out of these ideas. Some will and some won't. And the ones who won't, they always have the option to do something later on in life. But if you do something to hormonally block a child very, very early on, there's no turning back from that.
Well, let me say a few things to that.
How could you possibly say anything back against that?
First of all, I don't think it's correct that trans people, if they don't receive hormones from a young age, they simply become gay men. Because I know
it happens very often.
I know trans people.
See if you can find that, because there was a big article that was written about that recently, where they were talking about whether or not gender confirmation surgery and hormone blockers on young children is ethical because of this fact. And this was what they were talking about, where people at one point in time wanted to be trans, and they listed several famous examples. And then as they became older, just decided to be gay, including women who wanted to be men, who just became gay women.
There are many trans people that are still attracted to women. Like they transition to a woman and then they want to sleep with women.
I don't know any trans women personally who were gay men up until they transitioned, right? I know quite a few trans women who were straight men.
Think about what he's saying there. So they were straight men attracted to women, then they transitioned and they're attracted to women.
Who, lived their lives as presented as straight men, right? Mm-hmm. And then transitioned, right?
Often become lesbians, which is very odd.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the ways that people can be.
Do you think that would make women feel uncomfortable? It's like, so this individual who is attracted to seeing me now has access to this changing room.
So many of them say, I wish I had access. I knew this about myself at a very young age, and I wish to God that I had the ability to receive, these hormones at a young age. My life would be so much better.
It's like anecdotal evidence, just over and over.
And I'm not going to argue with those folks,
I wouldn't argue with those folks either, but you have to address the fact that there are people that have gone through transition surgery and said, I wish to God that I never did this. There's a lot of those people too. So if you're looking for anecdotal evidence and you want to be objective, you kind of have to look at both sides of it.
I'm sure we can find the anecdotes.
And anecdotal evidence doesn't even come close to any of the first principles that Joe's bringing up here. There's a problem here that's been identified. That's not so much that you have something that you're clinging to that you want to be true.
I would really, I've sort of reached the limit of like my facility with this topic. Mm-hmm. I really want to shout out videos made by a friend of mine. Her videos are called ContraPoints. Her name's Natalie Wynn, and she does these. She's a former philosopher, former philosophy PhD.
Mm-hmm. And it says something, the fact that Adam does a shout out for ContraPoints. That's the expert he thinks people should go listen to, because he's failing to be able to contend with anything Joe's saying.
But she really breaks down like a lot of these, a lot of misconceptions, right? And has really changed. Every time I watch one of her videos, I'm like learning new things, and like new ideas are like pop, pop, pop in my head,
Maybe that's not such a good thing, Adam. Right here, Joe just summarizes everything that we've just seen transpire.
Entire concern is that you're making decisions for children.
Yeah.
And that this is a completely new thing with no historical precedent. We've never done this before. There's not like a history of hundreds of years of hormone blockers being used on young children, and whether or not that is healthy and promotes a positive life. I feel like if a child thinks they're a girl, let them live as a girl. But you don't have to hormonally engage with their body with chemicals. It just seems crazy.